January 23, 1961. While most Americans slept peacefully in their beds, a B-52 bomber carrying 2 nuclear bombs, each 260 times more powerful than the one that destroyed Hiroshima, was breaking apart in the sky over North Carolina. And nobody knew. Major Walter Tullich was at the controls of that plane. His mission was supposed to be routine. A simple training flight along the East Coast. Nothing special. Nothing dangerous. Just another night in the Cold War. But at 12:30 a.m., everything went wrong. The plane's right wing suddenly started losing fuel. Fast. Thousands of gallons pouring out into the freezing night air. Tullich tried everything. Every procedure. Every trick he'd learned in his years of flying these massive bombers. Nothing worked. The B-52 was going down, and strapped to its belly were 2 Mark 39 hydrogen bombs. Each one carried 4 megatons of destructive power. To put that in perspective, those bombs could have instantly vaporized everything within an 8-mile radius. The fireball alone would have been visible from space, and they were falling toward one of the most populated regions on the East Coast. Tullich gave the order. Bail out. All 8 crew members scrambled for the exits as the plane spiraled toward the ground. The aircraft was tumbling now, breaking apart piece by piece. Metal screaming. Wind howling through torn fuselage. And somewhere in that chaos, 2 hydrogen bombs separated from the dying plane. They began their descent toward a small farming community outside Goldsboro, North Carolina. A place where families were sleeping. Where children were dreaming. Where nobody had any idea that in seconds, their entire world might cease to exist. One of those bombs did exactly what it was designed to do. It armed itself. Dawn broke over Goldsboro on January 24, 1961. The sun rose on a miracle that nobody yet understood. Wayne Fentress was a tobacco farmer. He'd worked the same land his whole life. He knew every inch of his property, every tree, every fence post. So when he walked out that morning and saw a massive parachute tangled in his trees and a crater the size of a house in his field, he knew something was very, very wrong. What he didn't know was that he was standing 20 feet away from a hydrogen bomb. The military arrived within hours. Dozens of vehicles, hundreds of personnel. They cordoned off the entire area. Told the locals it was just aircraft debris. Nothing to worry about. A training accident. That was a lie. Lieutenant Jack Revell was the bomb disposal expert who got the call. When he arrived at the scene and saw what they were dealing with, his blood ran cold. Because there, partially buried in the soft Carolina soil, nose down in the mud, was one of the most powerful weapons ever created by mankind. And it was armed. Revell later said that when he examined the bomb, he found that 3 of the 4 safety mechanisms had failed. 3 out of 4. The only thing standing between eastern North Carolina and complete annihilation was a single low-voltage switch. One switch. But here's what made Revell's hands shake as he worked. Here's what kept him up at night for years afterward. That switch, that final barrier between life and death for millions of people, it wasn't some high-tech fail-safe. It wasn't a sophisticated piece of Cold War engineering. It was a simple safety switch. And it had malfunctioned. The bomb should have detonated. By every technical analysis, by every simulation run afterward, that weapon should have exploded. The impact alone should have been enough to trigger it. But it didn't. Revell carefully extracted the weapon from the ground. Every movement precise. Every breath controlled. One mistake, and he wouldn't even have time to realize what happened. None of them would. But what about the second bomb? While Revell was defusing the first bomb, another team was searching for its twin. They found the parachute first, caught in some trees about a mile from where the first bomb had landed. That was good news. It meant the parachute had deployed. Maybe the bomb had landed softly. Maybe it was intact. Maybe it was safe. Then they found the crater. This one was different, deeper. The bomb had hit the ground hard, really hard, and it had kept going, straight down into the soft, swampy soil of eastern North Carolina. The recovery team started digging. They dug for days. They brought in heavy equipment, massive drills, pumps to remove the water that kept flooding the hole. They dug down 20 feet, 30 feet, 40 feet. They found pieces, chunks of metal, fragments of the casing, but not the core, not the uranium, not the actual nuclear material. At 50 feet, they hit the water table. The hole kept flooding. The walls kept collapsing. Every hour they spent digging, the bomb sank deeper into the mud. At 70 feet, they made a decision. They couldn't reach it. The bomb, or at least major parts of it, including possibly the nuclear core, was simply too deep. The more they dug, the more the soft soil collapsed around it. The bomb was sinking into the earth faster than they could excavate. So they stopped. The Air Force bought the land, all of it. They filled in the hole and placed restrictions on what could be done there. To this day, that land sits undeveloped. And somewhere beneath it, buried under decades of sediment and mud, are the remains of a 4-megaton hydrogen bomb. But the real question everyone was asking was simple. How did this happen? How did the most powerful military in the world almost accidentally destroy one of its own cities? The answer was more terrifying than anyone wanted to admit. The investigation into the Goldsboro incident revealed something that shocked even the military's top brass. The bombs weren't as safe as everyone thought. Not even close. See, the military had always assured the public that nuclear weapons had multiple fail-safes, layers upon layers of safety mechanisms. The chance of an accidental detonation was essentially zero. That's what they said in the press conferences. That's what they told Congress. That was wrong. Sandia National Laboratories conducted a full analysis of the Goldsboro incident. What they found was damning. The Mark 39 bomb, the same type that fell on North Carolina, had a design flaw that nobody had fully appreciated. When the bomb separated from the aircraft, it interpreted that separation as the beginning of a bombing run, an intentional drop. So it did what it was programmed to do. It began its arming sequence. The parachute deployed. That was supposed to happen. That slowed the bomb's descent and gave it time to arm itself before impact. Again, working exactly as designed. The barometric sensors activated. They measured the altitude. They calculated when the bomb would hit the ground, still working as intended. The impact fuses armed themselves, ready to detonate the weapon the instant it struck the target. Everything was working perfectly. The bomb was doing exactly what it was built to do. Except this wasn't a target. This was North Carolina. This was American soil. This was home. The only reason the bomb didn't explode was that single low-voltage switch. And here's the terrifying part. That switch had malfunctioned. It hadn't worked correctly. But it had malfunctioned in the safe position. Pure luck. Lieutenant Revell later testified before Congress. He told them the truth that the Air Force didn't want anyone to hear. He said, and this is a direct account of his testimony, that the bomb was fully armed, that it was ready to detonate, that only blind chance had prevented a catastrophe. He told them that if that bomb had exploded, it would have created a crater 3/4 of a mile wide. The fireball would have incinerated everything within 8 miles. The thermal radiation would have caused third-degree burns up to 20 miles away. The radioactive fallout, carried by the wind, would have contaminated an area the size of Maryland. Casualties. Conservative estimates put it at 50,000 dead immediately. Hundreds of thousands more from radiation exposure. Long-term, maybe millions. And this wasn't theoretical. This wasn't a war game scenario. This had almost happened. But the military's response to the investigation was even more troubling. For years, The military downplayed the Goldsboro incident. The official story was simple. A plane crashed. Some bombs fell. Everything was fine. The safety systems worked. No danger to the public. In 1961, the Air Force released a brief statement acknowledging the accident. They said the bombs had been recovered. They said there was never any danger of a nuclear explosion. They said the safety mechanisms had performed exactly as designed. That was a lie. The truth stayed classified for decades. It wasn't until 2013, more than 50 years after the incident, that the full details became public. A Freedom of Information Act request finally forced the government to release the Sandia report. And what that report revealed contradicted everything the Air Force had been saying for half a century. The bomb had been armed. The safety mechanisms had failed. The only thing that prevented detonation was luck. But why the cover-up? Why lie to the American people about how close they'd come to nuclear annihilation? The answer is complicated, but it comes down to two things: fear and politics. This was 1961, the height of the Cold War. Americans were already terrified of Soviet nuclear weapons. They were building fallout shelters in their backyards, practicing duck and cover drills in schools. The fear of nuclear war was constant, oppressive, existential. Now imagine telling those same Americans that their own military had almost nuked North Carolina, that the bombs they trusted to protect them from the Soviets had nearly vaporized an American city, that the safety systems everyone relied on had catastrophically failed. The panic would have been unimaginable. And politically? This was a disaster for the new Kennedy administration. JFK had just taken office 2 weeks before the Goldsboro incident. He was trying to project strength against the Soviets, trying to convince Americans that he could manage the nuclear arsenal responsibly. An admission that the Air Force had almost accidentally destroyed a major American city would have been politically devastating. So they buried it, classified the reports, gave sanitized briefings to Congress, told the public just enough to acknowledge the accident, but not enough to reveal how catastrophic it had almost been. And it worked. For decades, Goldsboro was a footnote, a minor incident, nothing to worry about. But the people who knew the truth couldn't forget. Here's what most Americans don't know. Goldsboro wasn't unique. The military has a term for these incidents. They call them broken arrows. That's the code name for any accident involving nuclear weapons, lost bombs, damaged warheads, accidental drops, crashes, fires. Since 1950, the U.S. military has officially acknowledged 32 broken arrow incidents, 32 times that nuclear weapons were involved in accidents. In 1958, a B-47 accidentally dropped a nuclear bomb on South Carolina. It landed in someone's garden. The conventional explosives detonated, creating a crater 30 feet deep and destroying a house. The nuclear core didn't detonate, but it was never found. In 1961, the same year as Goldsboro, another B-52 crashed in California carrying 2 nuclear bombs. In 1966, a B-52 collided with a refueling tanker over Spain. 4 nuclear bombs fell. 1 landed intact. 2 were recovered from the ground. The 4th fell into the Mediterranean Sea and took 3 months to find. In 1968, a B-52 crashed in Greenland with 4 nuclear weapons on board. The impact caused a massive fire. Some of the plutonium was scattered across the ice. They never recovered all of it. And those are just the ones the military admits to. Declassified documents suggest there have been many more incidents that remain classified. Think about that. Dozens of times, nuclear weapons have been involved in accidents. Dropped, lost, crashed, burned, and we only know about the ones the government chose to tell us about. Goldsboro stands out because of how close it came. 3 out of 4 safety mechanisms failed. 1 switch away from detonation, but it's part of a much larger pattern. A pattern of accidents, near misses, and catastrophes that were avoided by nothing more than luck. Today there's a historical marker near Goldsboro. It's small, easy to miss if you're not looking for it. It mentions the crash. It says some bombs fell. It doesn't mention how close the city came to being erased from the map. The farmer's field where the first bomb landed is still there. You can visit it if you know where to look. It's just farmland now. Peaceful. Quiet. Nothing to indicate that it was once ground zero for what could have been the worst disaster in American history. And that second bomb, the one they never fully recovered, it's still down there, buried under 75 feet of mud and water. The Air Force insists there's no danger. They say the nuclear material is contained. They say it's not a threat. Maybe they're right. Or maybe it's just another thing they're not telling us. Lieutenant Jack Revell, the man who defused the first bomb, spent the rest of his life trying to warn people about nuclear weapons safety. He gave interviews. He testified before Congress. He wrote reports. He wanted people to understand that these weapons aren't as safe as we think they are. That accidents happen. That luck runs out. He died in 2004, never fully convinced that anyone was listening. But maybe now, knowing how close we came, knowing that millions of people almost died in their sleep because of a mechanical failure and a broken switch, maybe now we'll listen. Or maybe, like that bomb buried beneath a North Carolina field, we'll just let it sink deeper into the mud until everyone forgets it's there. Until the next time we get lucky. Or don't.